Some places were never meant to be investigated. But tonight, we're going to talk about one of them. If you enjoy true horror and unexplained mysteries, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin. There's a rule they don't put in the Ranger handbook. If you hear whistling in the forest, you don't investigate. You don't radio it in. You leave. Immediately. I learned that rule the night my supervisor told me to ignore screaming after midnight. And what answered back wasn't human. People think park ranger horror stories are about bears, or accidents, or missing hikers who took a wrong turn. But the real rules? Those get passed down quietly, usually at 2 a.m., over bad coffee. Rules like, if you hear footsteps matching yours, stop walking. If a voice calls your name from the trees, don't answer. And the one nobody explains. If you hear whistling, you leave the forest. This happened during my 3rd year assigned to a Western National Park. Remote trails. No cell service. The kind of place where missing persons reports don't make the news. I was working graveyard patrol. Midnight to sunrise. Just me, a truck, and a radio that liked to cut out when it got cold. At 12:41 a.m., dispatch sent me to check a service road near the old fire lookout. Routine. Or so I thought. I heard it before I saw anything. A single whistle. Not a tune. Not random. 3 notes. Perfectly spaced. I slowed the truck. Rolled down the window. Listened. It came again. Closer this time. And that's when my stomach dropped. Because it wasn't coming from the forest. It was coming from the road ahead. I reached for the radio. Dispatch, this is Ranger 27. You hearing this? Nothing. Static swallowed my voice. Then the whistling changed. It copied the radio tone. The exact pitch. The exact rhythm. That's when I remembered the rule. The one my supervisor told me never to test. Dispatch finally came back. But it wasn't the dispatcher. It was my supervisor. His voice was low. Tight. He said, if you hear whistling, you are already too close. I asked him what was making it. He didn't answer that. He just said, if screaming starts after midnight, ignore it. At 12:47 a.m., the screaming started. A woman. At least, it sounded like one. Crying for help. Using full sentences. It knew how to sound desperate. Every instinct told me to run toward it. That's what rangers do. But my supervisor's voice kept replaying in my head. Ignore it. I stood there for 30 seconds. 30 of the longest seconds of my life. Then the whistling came back. Right behind me. Not loud. Playful. Like it was amused I hadn't turned around yet. That's when I realized something worse. The scream and the whistle were never overlapping. They were taking turns. I ran for the truck. Key in the ignition. Nothing. The engine clicked once. Then died. Outside the windshield, I saw movement. Not a body. Not a shape. Just trees bending inward, like they were leaning in to listen. The radio turned on by itself. No static. No call sign. Just breathing. Then the voice said my name. Perfectly. That's when I understood the rule wasn't about safety. It was about consent. If you answer, if you look, if you follow, you're agreeing to something you can't undo. I didn't answer. I didn't turn around. I pushed the truck downhill. Let gravity do the work. When the engine finally caught, the whistling stopped instantly, like a switch had been flipped. No scream. No voice. Just the forest, pretending it had always been quiet. My incident report was 3 sentences long. Unidentified noise. Radio malfunction. Area cleared. My supervisor signed it without reading. Later that week, I checked missing persons logs. No woman reported missing. No hikers overdue. But the whistling rule got repeated to 2 new rangers. Quietly. Like a warning. I didn't quit the Park Service after that night. Most people think that's strange. But here's the truth. Leaving doesn't mean you're done with it. It just means it knows where you are now. A few months later, I was back during daylight hours. Different trail. Different district. A rookie ranger walked up to me while we were checking signage. He looked pale. Hands shaking. He asked me a question nobody asks unless they've already heard it. He said, "Is it true about the whistling?" I asked him why he wanted to know. He said he'd heard it at 5 a.m. just before sunrise. 3 clean notes. And when he turned around, the sound moved. Stayed just out of sight. Like it was leading him somewhere. I told him the same thing my supervisor told me. You don't follow it. You don't answer it. You don't try to understand it. Because the moment you do, you stop being a ranger. You become something the park has to cover up. He laughed. Nervous laugh. Said it was probably just wind. That's what everyone says the first time. The second time, they don't laugh. 2 weeks later, his name showed up in the incident log. Not under missing persons. Not under injury. Just one line. Voluntary departure from service. No forwarding address. No goodbye. That's why the rule still exists. Not because the forest is dangerous, but because it listens. And it learns. It learns voices. It learns patterns. It learns which ones are willing to come closer. So if you ever find yourself in a national park after dark, and you hear whistling that sounds too perfect to be natural, don't investigate. Don't call out. Don't stay curious. Leave. Because whatever is making that sound already knows you're there. There's one more part of the rule they don't explain. Not to rookies. Not to supervisors. Not even to the people who write the reports. They never tell you that hearing it once isn't the end. I live 3 states away from that park now. Different climate. different trees, no trails, no radios. But habits don't disappear. I still wake up at night when the wind changes direction. Still pause when a sound feels measured. Last winter, during a storm, the power went out. Dead quiet. No hum. No electricity. That's when I heard it. Not outside. Not far away. Right below my window. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It wasn't calling for help. It wasn't pretending anymore. It was checking. I didn't look. Didn't open the window. Didn't move. Because that's the last part of the rule. The part they only learn after surviving it. It doesn't belong to one forest, or one park, or one set of coordinates on a map. It belongs to the spaces where people hesitate, and every ranger who hears about the whistling adds another place to that list. I didn't plan to tell this story. Not publicly. Not like this. Rangers aren't supposed to record things like this. We're trained to document facts, coordinates, weather conditions, witness statements, not patterns, not behaviors, not things that follow you home. But a few weeks ago, someone sent an email to Park Ranger Confidential. No name. No return address. Just a sentence. Is the whistling supposed to sound closer the second time? That's when I realized the rule wasn't failing. It was spreading. Different parks. Different states. Same description. 3 notes. Even spacing. Always heard when someone is alone. Always heard when help is far away. After that email, I called my old supervisor. The one who told me to ignore the screaming. He didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't ask why I was calling after all these years. He just said, "You heard it again, didn't you?" I asked him how many times it takes. He said there isn't a number. Some people hear it once and never again. Some people hear it their whole lives. But the ones who disappear, they're the ones who answer back, without realizing they did. Here's something the reports never include. It doesn't chase. It doesn't grab. It doesn't drag people into the woods. It waits. It uses concern, curiosity, training. Every missing persons case in national parks starts the same way. Someone hears something that shouldn't be there and decides not to ignore it. That's why the screaming rule exists. That's why the whistling rule exists. Because the forest doesn't need to hunt. It just needs you to volunteer. If you're listening to this with headphones, take one off for a second. Listen to the room you're in. Not the loud sounds. Not the obvious ones. Listen for something too clean, too intentional, too patient. Because it doesn't always start as whistling. Sometimes it starts as footsteps that stop when you stop. Sometimes it starts as your name said softly, in your own voice. The whistling is just the part people remember. There's a final instruction that never gets written down. If you ever hear someone explain these rules too clearly, too calmly, like I am right now. It means they're trying to pass it on, because knowing about it changes how it listens to you. I didn't end the recording because I was finished. I ended it because the room changed. Not visually. Not in a way you could point to. It felt occupied. When you spend enough time in national parks, you learn how silence behaves. Real silence settles. It has weight. This wasn't that. This silence was alert. I stayed where I was. Didn't stand up. Didn't check the door. Because that's another thing the training never covers. Distance doesn't matter. Only attention does. I could feel where it was in the room. Not see it. Not hear it. Just know where not to look. There's a reason older rangers talk less. Why they avoid specifics. Why their stories trail off. It's not trauma. It's discipline. Every detail you give it sharpens it. Every description teaches it how to repeat itself better. That's when I almost made a mistake. Not by speaking. Not by moving. By thinking about leaving. Because it reacts to intent faster than sound. The moment I imagined standing up, the silence tightened, like something leaning forward. The only reason I'm still here is because something else happened. A sound that didn't belong to the room, didn't belong to the forest, didn't belong to it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The vibration alone was enough to break the focus. When the feeling lifted, it didn't leave all at once. It backed away, carefully, like it was memorizing the room. I slept with the lights on that night. Not out of fear, out of procedure. This is why these stories keep getting told. Quietly, carefully, not to scare people, to slow them down. Because the most dangerous thing in any park is a person who thinks they're alone. The night after I locked the badge away, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I was waiting. Waiting to see if the rules still worked. When nobody was watching. At 3:18 a.m., the phone vibrated once. Not a call. Not a text. A voicemail. From a number that didn't exist. I didn't play it right away. That's another habit you pick up. You don't rush toward unexplained sounds. You let them sit. See if they change. When I finally listened, there was no voice. Just wind. The same kind you hear at higher elevations. Thin. Hollow. And underneath it, 3 notes. That's when I knew something important. It wasn't checking if I remembered the rules. It was checking if I was still alone. I deleted the voicemail without replying, without saving it. And for the rest of the night, nothing happened. Rangers aren't special. We're just predictable. We respond to sounds. We follow procedure. We go where others won't. That makes us useful. But once you stop responding, once you stop investigating, you become boring. And boredom is the one thing it doesn't chase. I keep my distance now. From parks. From trails. From places where sound carries too well. Not because they're dangerous, but because distance keeps the rules simple. There's something else people don't realize. The whistling isn't a signal. It's a test. Not of courage. Not of curiosity. Of restraint. And the people who pass it never get mentioned in reports. So if you're listening to this now, and nothing seems wrong, that's good. That means the rules are still working.